Hello there, we're going to do another Mag.JS tutorial. This is about the new version 0.2, which has some really nice new features. So I want to try to highlight that today. As always, we're starting at the Mag.JS GitHub homepage. I'm just going to start with one of our boilerplates here in the example section. Let's see. Here we go. So there's a new boilerplate plunker using the modular pattern called v0.2. Why don't we open that, see what that looks like? Pretty much the same. We have a very simple, the latest version of Mag.JS 20.6 with the add-ons. Comps aren't really necessary there. I'll get rid of that. And it just shows you how to basically initialize a Mag.JS component, which has a parent, and the parent is calling a child right up here. And there's not a whole lot going on here, but you can just kind of see what's going on here. When you click it, it's counting some things that we've passed to it. Alright, so why don't we get started? One thing we can do, let me just clean this up a little bit. So we're going to show how to use a reusable or create a reusable component today. And the idea here is really kind of simple. The reusable component is going to be something that it's going to be featured in more than one place, but it's going to maintain the state. So we're going to try to doing starring, like favoriting an article. So we're going to have a list of articles. You're going to be able to star it, but also be able to click a different view of the article, like a details view of the specific one, not just the list item. And in that detail view, you'll also have another star. So the same star to a unique article should maintain the state if it's favorited or not. So why don't we walk through that? So the first thing to do is why don't we get our HTML that we're going to need for the starring articles. So we have some articles, we have a template. So here's our articles HTML. Very simple Mag.js component HTML. We're using data bind as the element matcher here. Of course, you can always use ID, tag name, class name, or attribute name. But that's what we're doing here. And here's our component. But notice we have a component here too. So in the list, this is going to be the articles list. We're going to have a component for each article on the list. But also in our detailed view, which is basically below here, we're going to show that specific detailed view article star as well. And our actual HTML for our article star component is right over here. So why don't we just copy this HTML to get started? And one thing I like to do with the boilerplate is always just fork it to get started. Create kind of a new version. They're cheap, they're free. Alright, so once we've created our new version, why don't we put in our HTML? Alright, so here's our new HTML. Let's just kind of like review that real quickly. So we're hiding our component that is a template of that component, which is basically just literally a star. Oh, we're going to need some CSS as well. Why don't we just grab that? And by the way, I will put the URL to this plunker, the final version, in the video. So the CSS is simply just a star character. So you can see it here. And the text here is going to be something that's going to hold our property values of each unique article. This is going to hold our unique article data, and this will be our loop for our specific article and the star to that specific article, as well as the star here. Okay, so why don't we get started? First thing I want to do is our initializer. I don't know how necessary it really is in this particular instance, so I want to delete it. This is a very simple tutorial. And our parent mod, we're going to rename that to articles. Let's start with that. So articles. And the child will just be our star component. Okay. Why don't we start with articles first? So in articles, and we're not going to use the modular pattern in this specific example, so it's not necessary, and it's probably a little too complex. But let's take a look at our articles.js. So notice we have some data that we need, which is our specific articles, their title, the content, their ID that we're going to loop over. So why don't we just grab that first. So here's our articles data. And the next thing is going to be the articles component itself. So why don't we just get started with some of it. We don't have to copy paste all of it, or else it wouldn't be a tutorial. So why don't we just grab part of it. And we're missing our view. Alright, I think we can get started. Okay. So we have our modules, or our module. We have our props. Put an extra one there. There we go. Okay, there we go. So we have our module, we have a controller, we have our function. Here's our state, props, node, and the props that are sent to the controller. And since this is just Mag module, so we have a new feature in 0.2 is Mag create. And Mag create allows you to create an instance without initializing it until later using the reference. Mag module is still exactly the same as before. The only difference is the clone node option is no longer available. Basically, if you want to clone a node, you just create it with the return. I'll show you what that means. So why don't we get started here? So we have our articles, we have our view, we have our HTML, and basically we want to bind our article here. So what we're going to do is going to loop through our articles that we're getting in our props. We're going to attach it to our state. So state.article equal props.arts.map function art return, I think it was title. So title equal art.title. Oh, missing a typo there. You know what? We renamed the articles, but we didn't update the JS over here. Why don't we do that? Actually, let me put the child first. Star and then articles. No, we're not using the init in this example. I got the plunker loading there, taking a minute. And there we go. So it listed our articles from our data. We have our two articles that Mag.JS is putting inside the selector and binding it to the title over there. And we could have just as easily said H2, but just for descriptiveness, I put it there. So element matchers, again, are the tags. They could be data bind, they could be an ID, or they can just be an attribute name, like in a form field. All right, so back here, so once we have that, we want to probably start adding our star component. So this one we'll probably just copy and paste mostly, just for time and brevity. So, well, we can review it here quickly. So we have some data that we want to star and persist. So we have a service that takes an ID, and is it starred or not, true or false? And we're going to pass that into the props, our starred service. And here, notice we're using MagCreate. And all MagCreate does is it creates an instance that we can reference somewhere else without initializing it. And then we can initialize it somewhere else. So that being said, why don't we just copy all this over and paste it into our star.js. And just reviewing it again, it's creating this reference that we're going to be able to use in our articles. And just to look at it really quickly, it's very simple. It takes a property ID to identify some data to see if it's true or false, to say if the state should be active or not. And based on normal mouse events over and click, it will toggle the state of it and then put it back into that start thing, as well as notifying the parent that, hey, this new ID has changed. So why don't we go back here? So now we want to attach it. So why don't we look at our code here again? So, the simplest way to attach it is to literally call it. We want to pass in the ID, and we want to pass in the handler back. So why don't we create our callback handler as well? Alright, so in our controller, we have the articles. Notice how I don't even think this is necessary, so I'm going to get rid of that. We have our history just for the click history, updates the state and re-renders, and that's going to be our handle star click. But more importantly, we want to initialize our star. So let's look at our HTML, and here you can see our star. Again, this is just an element matcher. It could be class star, it could be data bind star, it could be whatever. I'm just doing that for readability. Alright, so back here, we're going to say star equals the name of our reference, star component. Okay. So now when we reference it, we're able to override or add new properties. And in this case, we just want to add the ID, which is going to be art.id. So once we've done that, we can now see it over here. One thing I didn't do was our details list. Oh, here, article star is showing up. No, this one's not showing up. It's this one. This one's not being hidden for some reason. Not quite sure why, but let's just check it out real quick. My style's not being included. I think that might be the reason. Why don't we go make sure? Yeah, they're not being included. Okay. So we're going to include them. There we go. Okay, so that hides our component template, and now it shows our two starred IDs. So those are our articles, and what do we want to do? We wanted to click it and show it below it here too, right over here in the content area. So why don't we do that as well? So basically what we want to say here is, since we're going to add an on-click event, we have to text it. I'm going to say on-click. But I have to bind the ID, make sure we have the right one. And then we're just going to say state dot, what was it, content equal, I think it was art.content. Let's look at our example. See, we're stating it over here. So if there's a state ID, we're just setting a state ID. Okay, that makes more sense. So all we're doing is we're going to set the state article ID over here. And then up over here in the view, if there is a state AID, and then we'll display it. State that content equal props.arts articles, and then the index is going to be -1 of the actual ID. Just for our example, we're going to show that. So we're going to say state that ID AID -1, get the content. I think I have a typo. Okay, so now the idea is when I click it, it will show the article content below it. Okay. Now one thing we're not doing yet is adding the star up over here. I think it was article star here, right? So we want to say state.article star equals, again, a new star component. Star component art ID. But it's actually AID. There we go. State AID. More specific. All right. So now we have ability to list our articles, see the article content for the specific one we clicked, and an article ID for each of these star components. So, excuse me. So the goal here is now, when I click one, it should update the other as well, and vice versa. We haven't done much code, so let's see what happens. So I'm on my first article here. I click it here. Now it started on the top, but it didn't start on the bottom. And I think that's mostly because our click handler is not in place yet. So why don't we go back over here? So we haven't passed in the on star click. So we need to pass that in like so. Handle star click. So why don't we do that? So notice that we have it in two places. We have our star comp on the details over here, and we have it in the specific title. Okay, so now if I click the first article, I have my first details below. I star it. Notice how it started below. But if I unstart from below, it removes it from the top. If I start from below, it adds it to the top. If I unstart from the top, it removes it. Let's go to the second article. And there too, I can start and unstart from the top, start and unstart from the top as well. So that's pretty much it for the article and for the tutorial right now. What I can show you else is just a little kind of bonus here, but that's basically the article. I'm going to save the version there. The tutorial is over, but if you would like to hang around for a little bit more, I'll show you kind of a little extra bonus on how to get the content, or I should be more specific, the state or the properties put into this text area here. So why don't we just play around a little bit. So state.text area, I can make it equal whatever I want, right? Hello. It's taking a little while for Plunker over there to catch up. It's still loading. This is not client side. This is server side loading. Well, all right. We can just move along here. So the basic idea is we're going to add a JSON stringify of our state. And the way we get a reference to the state is through the article star itself. So whenever you initialize a component, it returns an instance of it. The instance of it can be used however you like. And there's a certain built-in methods such as getProps, getState, getID, and draw. Draw initializes a redraw of that specific component. And you can look for more information on that on the API link. So if you go here to the API link, you'll see the new Mag create version 0.2. And you can see whenever you create a new instance, you can initialize it with new properties, and that instance of the initialization gives you some methods back, such as getID, draw, getState, as well as getProps. And if you want to clone it, and this is what you do here, that'll create a new clone specific to that index. Alright, so why don't we go back over here and show you how that works. Oh, we're having some loading issues, it looks like. There we go. Doesn't look like it picked up our change. Oh, that's only when I click it. Sorry. Okay, so if I click the article, that's when it shows up. Alright, I'll show you another trick. So in Mag.js, you can go like this. You can say world. Or even better yet, let's do the hello over here. And then you can say world over here by simply appending it like that. So now, when I click an article title to see the view, so you notice how hello is defaulted because that's in the controller. This is the controller, but this equals state. Now when we have an IAID, that means when I click it, it appends it. Okay. So why don't we do something different now? We wanted to get the state like this. Okay. So state text area plus JSON stringify will give us the article star get props. Let's check that out. And there it is, because this is the article props that we sent in. ID, state ID. Click the second one, I get the second props. Now what about the state? Well, the state's a little more complicated because we're adding state to the state, and also state is asynchronous. So you want to sort of get the most up-to-date. So I think what's going to happen here is we're going to get the last one, but let's just check it out anyways. So it says false. Now if I click the first one, it doesn't change anything. I click the second one, it didn't change anything either. What if I set timeout it? Now when I click the specific one, it's showing me the information, but what if I click the star itself? It doesn't change the state, it doesn't say true. If I click the second one, then it changes. So the set timeout is accurate, meaning it's delayed. So it's getting the information, but it's only getting the last one. It's not getting the update to the first one. See, I'm clicking the first one, it's not changing. But if I click the second one, it changes. All right, well, I'm going to save this, and I will post a link to this as well in the video. Hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and until next time, thank you very much.